Since background information can help us respond to a work of art, let me tell you something about this painting. On April 26, 1937, at the request of the rebel forces, who were led by General Franco, German bomber pilots completely destroyed a defenseless town named Guernica. The Germans wanted to experiment with a new technique of war, what they called saturation bombing. It was the first saturation air raid of the century. Something like 3,000 bombs were dropped in 3 hours, and then the survivors were machine gunned in this tiny little village of Guernica. And that deadly technique, saturation bombing, was to figure prominently later on in World War II. 1 month after the raid, after 25 preliminary sketches, Picasso painted Guernica, this painting, as a protest. The painting was shown at the World's Fair in Paris in 1937 at the Spanish Pavilion, and it immediately became famous. After the World's Fair, Picasso said that the painting had to stay in New York at the Museum of Modern Art until democracy was restored in Spain. Picasso died in 1973, General Franco died in 1975, democratic elections were held in 1981, and the painting was returned to Spain in 1982.
The painting is a powerful work of historical documentation and political protest. But while Picasso's artistic motivations are clear, the symbolism of the painting can be as confusing and chaotic as war itself. How can we make sense of this overwhelming image? And what exactly makes it a masterpiece of anti-war art? The painting's monumental canvas is disorienting from the start, rendered in the abstracted Cubist style Picasso pioneered. Cubism deliberately emphasized the two-dimensionality of the canvas by flattening the objects being painted. This afforded viewers multiple and often impossible perspectives on the same object, a technique considered shocking even in Picasso's domestic scenes. But in this context, the style offers a profoundly overwhelming view of violence, destruction, and casualties. Multiple perspectives only compound the horror on display, sending the eyes hurtling around the frame in a futile hunt for peace. On the far left, a woman holding her dead child releases a scream, her eyes sliding down her face in the shape of tears and her head bending back unnaturally to echo her baby's. There is a statue of a soldier present below, but he is unable to defend the woman and child. Instead, his broken body lies in pieces, his arm clutching a splintered sword in a signal of utmost defeat. The tip of his sword meets a woman's foot as she attempts to flee the devastation, but her other leg appears rooted to the spot, locked in the corner of the canvas, even as she stretches to move it. Another victim appears behind this slouching figure, falling helplessly as flames lick around her. She too is caught in her own hopeless scene. Each of these figures bordering the painting are horribly trapped, giving the work an acute sense of claustrophobia. And where you might expect the canvas's massive size to counteract this feeling, its scale only highlights the nearly life-sized atrocities on display. Some possible relief comes from a lamp held tightly by a ghostly woman reaching out her window. But is her lantern's hopeful glow truly lighting the scene? Or is it the jagged light bulb, thought to represent the technologies of modern warfare, which illuminates her view of the chaos below? From the coffin-like confines of her window, her arm guides the viewer back into the fray to perhaps the most controversial symbols of all: two ghostly animals caught in the destruction. Does the screaming horse embody the threat of Franco's military nationalism, or does the spike running through its body convey its victimhood? Does the white bull represent Spain, the country of matadors, and a common theme in Picasso's work, or does it stand for the brutality of war? In this scene of strife, these animals raise more questions than answers, and additional elements hidden throughout the frame offer even more secrets for close observers. At the top of the canvas flashes a bird desperate to escape the carnage. And the abundance of animals on display may hint at the bombing's date, a market day which flooded the streets with villagers, animals, and other potential casualties. Like the bombing of Guernica itself, Picasso's painting is dense with destruction. But hidden beneath this supposed chaos are carefully crafted scenes and symbols carrying out the painting's multifaceted attack on fascism.
What at first glance seems a jumble of confusion is actually structured and organized once we stop to look more closely. Images are loosely grouped into geometrical sections, 3 large rectangles left to right as marked by the vertical yellow lines, and some triangular areas scattered across the canvas. These groupings help break our visual experience up into manageable chunks and guide our eye as it jumps around the painting. You've got a repeated theme of the shrieking mouth. You got the screaming woman. You got the victim of the flames. You got the face of the soldier. Even got the horse's face. They're all distorted. And the somber color seems to emphasize the horror of the scene. Notice that the body of the horse resembles a printed newspaper, underscoring the bombing as a contemporary event. Thinking back to a previous painting, The Eternal City, notice how the form establishes the relationships of the parts. In the center of the painting, you've got the fascist black shirts overthrowing the government. So that's central to the meaning of the painting. Off to one side is Christ. He's not only removed, but also bricked off from what's happening. So therefore, he's neglected. Notice that Christ is smaller and less important to the composition than the head of Mussolini, which is the largest shape and therefore in control of what's happening. The 2 shapes beneath Mussolini's head represent the smiling common people. They're the ones who supported Mussolini and thought they would benefit from his rise to power. So the form is the arrangement of the parts of the composition. The form organizes our perception by establishing the relationship of the parts. The form actually helps get across some of the meaning of this painting by directing our attention to what's important. And therefore, obviously, we need to learn to pay attention to the form in order to fully understand a work of art. Now, form isn't always easy to spot. Why? Because we're often too busy looking at the picture. The picture can distract us from noticing the relationships. But form is one of the first things we need to learn to notice if we want to try to get inside a painting and discover how it works. We need X-ray vision. So what can we conclude? Well, first of all, background information is important, as we've seen earlier, if we want to fully understand this painting. 2, the details in this painting have been very carefully organized or arranged on the canvas in geometrical patterns, the net effect of which is to balance the entire composition, and it also focuses and controls our attention, the way we look at it. And that brings us to the concept of form. Form is simply the inner relationship of the parts. Now, what parts? Well, the lines, the colors, the shapes, the lights and shadows, the textures. Sometimes those are called elements. Form refers then to the arrangement of the parts, to the arrangement of the elements. And it's important because it directs and controls our attention. It influences the way we look at the art. In other words, it focuses our attention and it organizes our perception.